Hey, ladies, I hope you're doing well. I've been having a really great week, and today we're going to be talking about something that is special to me because it is highly requested, and that is planning for pregnancy. There are a bunch of tips and tricks and hacks for all the women who just found out that they're pregnant or they're going through pregnancy, but there's not a lot of information that is relatable or understandable for women who are in the planning phase and thinking about having a baby. So today, I thought it would be great to go through a couple of tips that I have to start this process, and I hope that you guys find it really helpful. So let's get into the episode. I really want to spend some good time on this. And so I'm going to be talking about ways to prepare your body for pregnancy over the course of this episode and the next. It may even go into another one because I feel like this is an area where a lot of women are curious. And unfortunately, not nearly enough time is devoted to those women who are wanting to get pregnant but not pregnant yet. I feel like there's a bunch of information out there for, when you are expecting, but let's say you're in the phase of kind of planning and you're trying to conceive or thinking about it, we can definitely do a better job there. So, we're going to get into what you can do to prepare your body. And the very first thing that I'm going to recommend is to do a body check in. So, what that means is you want to check in literally with your body and figure out what is its baseline, if that makes sense. So, what feels good to your body? What kind of things are you eating? What are you drinking? What are your sleep habits? What medications are you taking? Probably the biggest one is, what is your menstrual cycle like? So, you really want to look into especially this because fertility is really important when it comes to making a baby. And your menstrual cycle is going to be a great indicator of how fertile you are, if that makes sense. So you kind of have to have a awareness of, at least when you may be more fertile than others, if you know when you ovulate, that's even better. There are a bunch of different ways to kind of detect ovulation, and where you can start is just tracking your periods. And from there, you can kind of count based off of your typical cycle length. So, for example, they always kind of use the 28-day cycle as the, I don't know, standard, even though most women don't have a 28-day cycle. So just be on the lookout for that. But they tend to use that as an example. So I will as well. If you have a 28-day cycle, that means that on day one, that's the first day of your period. If you have about a 4 or 5 day period, then about, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 days after that, you may start to be in your fertile window. And usually around day 14 is when ovulation is expected. Now, that's not always the case. And the way that you would really know that is by tracking your actual ovulation. There are apps that help just overall tracking this. And the way that they work typically is by you inputting the first day of your period. If you know how long your cycle is, then you could put that in as well. Otherwise, the way that they'll do it is probably a guess in the length of your cycle until you start inputting your periods in there. And once you put in, the first day of your period, and then you go through a full cycle and you put the next first day of your period, then it'll be a better guess of how many days is in your particular menstrual cycle. And from there, they do an educated guess as to when you are most fertile and when you are likely to ovulate within the parameters of the data that you put in there. Now, that can be helpful, but it's not exactly accurate. It's a guess at best. And so the way that I recommend doing this, especially in the beginning, if you're not, that in tune with your body per se, especially if you're coming off of birth control and you haven't had a typical cycle in a long time, I recommend getting ovulation sticks. You can get them on Amazon, you can buy them at the store, and each one is a little bit different. But the way that it works is just by detecting something called luteinizing hormone, or LH, in your urine. And LH spikes when it's close to the time of releasing an egg or ovulation. And so by using ovulation sticks, you will get a sense of when LH is high, and that'll give you indication that you are probably going to be releasing an egg soon. And you can put all of that good data into an app, and that'll help kind of the AI that, runs the app help you predict future ovulations, and thus you would have a better sense of when you are going to be ovulating and when to try for a baby. But it's also good just in general to know what your body is doing at different points in the cycle. And that'll just help to continuously build your intuition and your body wisdom in this process before you even get pregnant. Now, those are some of the things that you can do at home immediately. Something else that I would recommend doing is getting an appointment with a medical professional. It can be a naturopath. You can talk to your OB. You can go to just a primary care physician. You just want to go and get a physical. And with that physical, I think it would be really good to get blood work done, because you want to know what's going on internally, and get a good baseline for what's happening with your body. What are your levels like? Blood sugar, your thyroid, is that functioning well? How's your liver functioning? Obviously, you want to check out your heart, blood pressure. You can check into things like gut health. Is there anything going on there? Do you have any pre existing conditions that you know about already that you just want to monitor? Or maybe there are pre existing conditions that you didn't know about, and maybe that blood work will, uncover. There are definitely specific organs, I guess, or, different levels of functioning that are important when it comes to being pregnant. And, if you have issues with blood sugar, for example, that's going to be something that you want to know about before you get pregnant, because gestational diabetes is common, and it's something that, can put harm to you and the baby. Similarly, if you have high blood pressure at baseline before you get pregnant, that's going to be something that, can be an issue when you get pregnant, and you want to be monitoring that stuff beforehand. So it's always good to just get a nice thorough check. You don't have to call it anything special. Like, you don't have to go in there and say, I want to have a baby. There are actually real appointments that are available that I think are called preconception appointments that I think happen with OBs. And I kind of caution women against this, because if you go into it and you're telling them that, you're going to try to have a baby, and then there's something that comes up, there can be some fears that are put on you that don't necessarily need to be there when you're trying to have a baby. I'm going to talk about that more in the next episode, but there are certain things that you don't necessarily need to be afraid of at the start of this thing. Like, for example, if a doctor found out, that there was something in your gut, like if you had celiacs or, an allergy of some kind, and then they said, oh, well, this may cause you to have trouble conceiving, or when you're pregnant, this may be an issue. Well, now you're going to go into this with stress and fear and anxiety, and that's going to be harder for, the conception process. You don't want to go into this with, fears and stress that may end up making it less fun and exciting. And especially if this is your first time, heading into motherhood, you don't want to go into it with that fear based mentality. But yeah, so get the check, get the blood work, make sure things are going smoothly, and then head into my next really, really important tip. And that tip is to figure out what the heck is going on with your nutrition. What are you eating? And what do you need to eat going into pregnancy? So, nutrition is a tricky area because everyone has, their own thing that they need to say about it. I am not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, a dietitian, and that very well may take me out of the running for, the competition in who matters in your brain. But I'm a normal person. I can research things, and I'm a mother of two children, and I've been pregnant 3 times. So I do have a lot of personal and anecdotal experience, as well as just being a mother friend to several other women. And what I can say is across the board, hands down, nutrition is incredibly important when it comes to pregnancy. And I think it's a really great idea to get in the habit of paying attention to your nutrition before you even conceive. I think this is even more important when it comes to kind of the first thing that I talked about, which is the body check, especially if you're someone who is either underweight or overweight. These two have major implications when it comes to fertility. So, for example, when I was in college, I used to bodybuild. I used to want to be in those competitions, and I was very lean, very fit, and I felt great, looked great. Now, I had a sort of body assessment just for fun, and something that came of that was that the woman who did the assessment actually said, "You look great, but just a warning, you only have 12% body fat." And while that is great for what you're trying to do, it's actually really harmful for your overall health. And she said specifically when it comes to fertility, she asked me if I was still having a period because women who have a very low body fat percentage actually tend to lose their period. This is also true if you just work out excessively. You'll find, variations in your period. It may become atypical. And that's because when you're at that level of body fat, your body doesn't want to make a baby. That low level of body fat is honestly not necessarily enough to even sustain one person, but to then make another person for your body to also keep alive, it's like, no, thank you. This is too much. And so, what will happen often is that women with that low level of body fat won't even have a period at all because they're not releasing an egg to be fertilized. I've heard the same thing be true for someone who is extremely overweight, that they may also have atypical periods. I'm less familiar with how it all works when someone is overweight, so definitely look into it if you're someone who is experiencing this issue, because I don't want to say one way or another how that is the case. But anecdotally and from, other people's experiences, I do know that it can impact your period, in which case I would guess that something is going wonky with, ovulation and overall fertility. So, thinking about nutrition and how you fuel your body going forward is going to be really important, especially when you want to kind of compensate for either of these problems. If you don't have, an extreme either way, or just a typical, person, then still focusing on nutrition is going to be important. Now, the first thing that I'm going to recommend is just to figure out how to balance your diet. If you find that you're eating a lot of processed foods, things like bread and candy and chips, you're going to want to cut those out. I would say cut those out anyway. Just as a rule of thumb, processed foods and ultra processed foods are just not good for you in general. But when it comes to getting good quality foods in, those are not it. So you want to kind of balance it and have, the grains that you need and fruits and vegetables and, good quality proteins. I'm not going to say whether it needs to be meat or not. I know many people who are vegetarian and vegan who get, enough protein to sustain themselves and their babies. But you just want to have it be balanced. There are definitely specific vitamins and minerals and things that are really helpful in, just kind of maintaining a pregnancy and helping a baby grow. And so you can look into foods that have those vitamins. Um, there's a book called Real Food for Pregnancy by Lily Nichols. I actually think she also has a book called Real Food for Fertility. So you can look into either one of those. She is a registered dietitian and she typically gives a lot of research to back up what she's saying. I know that Real Food for Pregnancy does have a conception portion in the front of the book. So that could be really helpful if you're not really sure where to start. Maybe you eat pretty good, but you want to do better and you don't know, where to go to find the right answers. You can definitely check that book out. I think it is on Amazon, but if you just type it into Google, I'm sure you'll find what you're looking for. Now, this is kind of a sub paragraph on nutrition because it has to do with what you're putting in your body. And I like to take the stance of do no harm. So, whatever you are putting in your body that you know is harmful, just outright harmful, then you want to stop that before you get pregnant. So, things like smoking, drinking, if there are specific medications that you're using, obviously just explicit drugs, right? You want to cut those down or completely out before you try for a baby. And that's important for many reasons. Number one, they're just not good for you. We know that smoking, especially cigarettes, are just not good for you anyway. Drinking in excess is also problematic and harmful. There are specific medications like Accutane, for example, if you were to get pregnant, are very dangerous for you and the baby. And so, if you're thinking about trying to conceive, then you definitely don't want to be taking that at the same time. I'm sure there are many different medicines that can be harmful when you're pregnant and that you might want to get off of beforehand. But I'm not a doctor and I can't go through all of them. But just anecdotally, some of the information that I've heard from others is that certain antidepressants can be very hard to wean off of just in general. And if you're someone who doesn't want to take them while you're pregnant, trying to wean off of a medication while you're pregnant is a horrible idea, especially if it's the like Valium, Xanax, Clonopin. There are different organizations out there that are so against these medications that they are rallying for people to never be put on them in the first place because the weaning off is so horrible. The side effects are so awful. And so, if you're someone who's taking any of those, you definitely want to be talking to your doctor about starting the process of withdrawing from these before you get pregnant. Okay, so the last part that I'm going to be talking about today are prenatal vitamins. And I've said in previous episodes that I don't really have any interest in discussing prenatal vitamins. And I think it's because it's so controversial and really for no reason. I know that doctors recommend that you take prenatal vitamins before you get pregnant and then throughout your pregnancy. And in fact, you're kind of looked down upon if you don't take them during pregnancy because obviously, like, you're harming your child. But I am from the camp that you don't need them. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, before I get into it, you do what's best for you. I'm just going to give the information and then you can decide what you're going to take from this information. I'm going to lead with scientific data. That's the best bet here. And so there's a study that was recently published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. I believe the researchers were out of the University of Colorado. And what they found was that most prenatal vitamins, in fact, 99% of prenatal vitamins that are available in the US are not adequate enough to replace or make up for the nutritional deficits that women in America have going into pregnancy. Now, they also found that 90% of women in this country are nutritionally deficient when it comes to what you need for a healthy pregnancy. And so they're trying to figure out how they can get this replacement in the form of prenatal vitamins to be adequate enough to make up for that nutritional deficiency. But the part that I'm focusing on is that in this study, they admitted that prenatal vitamins are not doing a good enough job. And if 99% of them aren't doing a good enough job at present, then it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take them, in my opinion, if they're not doing what we think they're doing. I think a big factor in all of this is that we are nutritionally deficient at baseline. So, my normal inclination would be to try to fix that because prenatal vitamins are not intended to replace your normal nutrition anyway. It's supposed to be supplemental. They're called supplements. And so, I think a good place to start is with your own diet. What I talked about before, your current nutrition, fixing that first because taking prenatal vitamins, this study has proven that they're not actually helpful. Or if they are helpful, it's kind of minimally helpful because, it's not replacing what you're deficient in. Now, another big problem that I have with these vitamins are that they aren't typically FDA approved or, monitored. So anyone can just, decide that they're going to make a prenatal vitamin. They can say that it has all of these benefits and put whatever they want in it, and then say, hey, take this and sell it and get money for it. And so that's problematic because they can literally put whatever they want in there and you don't know what you're getting. You can read the label, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting what's on the label. Now, going along with the label, most multivitamins are synthetic. They are full of synthetic vitamins that are man made, they are not naturally occurring vitamins. Now, if you're okay with that, well then, go get them. But I'm not necessarily okay with, putting synthetic things into my body, especially when it comes to making my children. I mean, they deserve the absolute best. When you're creating a person, they should be getting the most natural form of everything, to ensure that they're going to be developing the way that they should be. So we have the synthetic vitamins, and then we also have various fillers and, additives that can cause side effects that are unintended, like inflammation, for example. And a lot of times when they put the daily value on there, a lot of these pills have way over the daily recommended value. Like, I've seen pills that had 3,000% the daily value of biotin or something, and I'm like, surely I don't need all of this, especially if I'm eating throughout the day. So whether you eat super healthy or not, whatever you eat is probably going to have some sort of nutritional value, even if it's small. And so if you eat, I don't know, 2,000 calories in the day and, of various different things, you're going to be getting some sort of vitamins and minerals that way. And then to take a prenatal vitamin sometimes twice a day, that has 3,000% of the daily value of something, you're kind of setting yourself up for toxicity. And even vitamins in excess, like for example, too much vitamin A can be catastrophic for an adult. I can only imagine the kind of things that probably can happen to a developing baby. So, when it comes to prenatal vitamins, I am on the fence for sure because of, kind of the state of it. I think if there was a good quality prenatal that had whole foods and folate instead of folic acid and was from a reputable source, then I might be more inclined to say take it. But because they're so rare, like 1% actually, because they said 99% are not good, um, because they're so rare, I just leaned on getting a good quality nutrition through the foods that I ate. And then I supplemented specifically with, different teas and things that I knew the source of. And just one other part to add to this rant, I was listening to a doctor on YouTube and he was talking about how much he hates just multivitamins in general. And he made a good point. He was saying most people are not deficient in, everything. And if they are, it's very specific things. And he said most people don't know what they're deficient in. And so to take specific vitamins when you may not even be deficient in those areas is kind of silly. And I absolutely agree. Now, I will say if you got screened in step 1 and you know that, let's say you're deficient in iron or vitamin D or something like that, then I think it's a good idea to supplement with those things that you know you're deficient in. But if you don't know one way or another, then why would you take something to supplement if you don't have any deficiencies? Does that make sense? I feel like we should take a common sense approach to this. Yes, it is often recommended. And so people like to just go along with, whatever recommendations are. But if you take a step back and kind of start to critically think about this, why would you supplement something that is unnecessary? So I think a good first step is to get that screening and get, all of that baseline done. And then if there's a specific area where you do need to get some help, that's the pill to take. All right, ladies, that's all for today. I'm going to be back next week with part 2 of this planning for pregnancy series, I guess this is. I'm going to be talking about a couple more really important areas to focus on when trying to conceive and, planning out your future with your little one. So if you're interested in that, then definitely check in next week for that. If you have any questions until then, you can find me on Instagram, Blossoming Mama 12. You can find me on Facebook with the same tag and YouTube, The Blossoming Mama. All right, ladies, I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care of yourselves.